following is a special presentation of the HBO sports documentary series, Legends and Legacies.
Gonna set my soul on fire.
UNLV basketball represented what Vegas was about. Really fast, entertaining. It was quite a show.
Vegas was a big-time town. It was absolutely mind-boggling.
We were traveling rock stars. No one could stop us.
They had personality. They played with passion. They pissed people off. They made other people proud. They were Vegas.
And they're on the run.
For the better part of 2 decades, from the early 1970s to the early 1990s, the Runnin rebels of UNLV embodied the spirit of the city they represented. Brash, bold, swaggering, and dedicated to the notion that winning and winning big was all that mattered.
Yes, 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 yes.
The Rebels were a dynasty in the desert, one of the longest running and most successful shows on the Strip. The one act Vegas could call its own. With a charming yet controversial coach and a flamboyant style of play that was a lot wild and a little wicked, the Rebels owned Sin City and against all odds hit the college basketball jackpot. The run of a lifetime for a small school from the West.
You have to understand that in the early 1970s, when they went to national and especially even regional meetings, no one knew what UNLV's acronym meant.
They called it Tumbleweed Tech. It was out in the middle of the boondocks. But it had a lot of great boosters and people who wanted to see it succeed.
Donald Bepler, an influential UNLV vice president, was one of those who felt the creation of a successful basketball program would raise the university's profile, and with it, its academic standing. His approach was fully embraced by an eager group of athletic boosters who already had their eye on an up-and-coming coach making waves on the West Coast, Jerry Tarkanian.
I had met Jerry when he was at Pasadena City College. He was a great coach, a great recruiter. I called him one day and just asked him if he'd have an interest in the job, and he kind of laughed and said, "No, I don't think so." You know, and then we started the process. And so I talked to Jerry, and then I talked to his wife, and then I talked to the kids 2 or 3 hours a day, 7 days a week.
They drove us crazy. You know, they're calling and calling and calling. I didn't want to come, and they were just insistent, "Oh, come on out and see what it's like."
I'm not sure he decided to come until the very day came.
They were a relatively unknown program, but they had the resources and they had the potential. In fact, I told my wife, I said, "Lois, this is going to be like a college town." She said, "Are you kidding? You're crazy. How could Vegas be a college town?"
So he took me down the Strip, and doggone it, wouldn't you know, there was cars going by. "Hey, Tart!" When we first came, we didn't have a home or anything, so we lived in a room in a casino.
Sheriff, place your bet. 13 black. Let it go.
So that wasn't very good.
It wasn't long before the Tarkanians moved out of the casino and into a brand new home, bought at the builder's cost. There were other benefits as well, like the more than 200 game tickets with which Tarkanian could do as he pleased. All he had to do was win.
And that's something we can correct.
When I took this job, I felt that we could be very competitive in our league, but I never anticipated us getting to the level that we got to.
And with tough athletic players like Ricky Sobers, Jackie Robinson, and Eddie Owens, he did. 20 games in his first season and 24 the next. Tark's Rebels were really on the run.
The Rebels were Showtime before the Lakers were Showtime. They scored a lot of points and it was very fast-paced, but really the team was built around defense.
Tark's motto was, we're going to play 40 minutes of non-stop pressure basketball.
Stolen, beautiful steal, and Sam Smith.
We wanted to score, steal it, and score again.
And they're on the run.
We were getting so many turnovers, so many steals that we just started scoring quick, and then all of a sudden, you know, you look up and you got 69 points at halftime.
Beautiful move by Johnny Sack.
Scored 110 points a game with no three-point line.
100 points again for the Runnin' Rebels.
They had great teams, and I remember as a kid, I used to go into my mom's bedroom, and I'd take my blanket with me, and I put the blanket over the television and over myself and watch the entire game. And we were watching artists out there.
In 1976 and 1977, UNLV lost a total of just 3 regular season games. Affectionately known as the Hardway 8, because they relied on only 8 players. The 77 Rebels were a scoring machine. They set NCAA records for most points in a season and consecutive games scoring more than 100 points. And made their first ever trip to the Final Four. In the national semifinals against North Carolina, the Rebels took a 10-point lead in the second half, but they wound up losing by 1, 84-83. The unexpected Rebel run to the Final Four was more than just exciting. It provided a rallying point for a struggling community.
The year Tarkanian arrived, 73, the MGM Grand opens on the Strip. It's the last major hotel till Steve Wynn opens the Mirage in 89. Las Vegas was slowing down a bit in terms of its reputation, in terms of business, in terms of entertainment. Internationally and nationally, you have stagflation. You have the Arab oil embargo. Throw in Atlantic City cutting into Las Vegas's business, and it's a difficult time.
Atlantic City has put in 893 slot machines, 60 blackjack tables, 10 dice tables, and it hopes to become rich enough to compete with Las Vegas.
If they aren't coming here, then the whole state is going to suffer. The Rebels, in a funny sort of way, divert us from all that. What other sports did Las Vegas have?
They didn't have professional football, they didn't have professional baseball, they didn't have professional basketball. And there were many people who said, we never go to the casinos, but college basketball very suddenly became the event in town if you were a sports fan.
In the late 70s, I was in like 7th or 8th grade, and the Rebels were in the top 10. I remember thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. They're in the top 10 in the nation. We didn't have anything like that. We didn't have an athlete to rally around. The Rebels were ours.
Wherever our kids go, that's the talk of the town. It was more difficult to get a ticket to a UNLV basketball game than it was to the Frank Sinatra show.
Turns out Frank Sinatra was more than just a regular on the Strip. He was a big supporter of Rebel basketball, willing to use his Italian heritage to help his Armenian friend.
The #1 fan of the Rebels is a singer whose name at the moment escapes me. He actually recruits for Tarkanian. Not long ago, he called a prospect in Long Island to make a pitch about UNLV.
I was a rising junior at Farmingdale High School. Dinner time on a Saturday night, the phone rang. The person on the other end said, "May I please speak to Jim? This is Frank Sinatra." And my mother said, "This is Ella Fitzgerald, goodbye." And 2 minutes later, he explained to me that Jerry Tarkanian was very interested in my coming to play at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Eventually, I decided to choose University of South Carolina. Frank Sinatra was a hard thing to refuse.
In the end, Old Blue Eyes proved to be a better singer than a recruiter. But his willingness to be Tarkanian's messenger spoke loudly about how high this unlikely star had risen. Even in a town full of world-renowned entertainers, one stood out. An affable coach with a trademark towel known as Tark the Shark.
I'll take the 2 on the right.
Perfect, that's it.
Well, I think they're a great team, and I'm very delighted for them, except Tarkanian is eating up all their linen. The man sits on the bench and eats towels.
Vegas has a lot of famous people in it. Most of them don't live there, they come through, but you see stars all the time. Growing up there, I saw Liberace buying meat in the Mayfair Market, and Sammy Davis Jr. buying pants in the boys section at Saks Fifth Avenue. And these are things you see regularly, and they're weird things. But Tark is a great character. He always looks so sad. He's chewing on his towel. He looks like a bulldog or something. He looks like a stuffed animal.
You didn't have to be a big shot, high roller to relate to Jerry Tarkanian. He was such an everyman. He was a regular guy. He enjoyed going to a hole-in-the-wall joint to eat. He didn't drive around in a Rolls Royce except when he was recruiting. If you were a bellman, if you were a dealer, a waitress, you could relate to Tark.
And what made it so endearing was that Tark didn't understand or realize the fame that he had. I mean, he liked going somewhere getting dinner for free. You know, who doesn't like that? But at the same time, we'd be on the road with the basketball team, and there'd be times where some half-drunk guy would come up to him in a bar and want to talk about the amoeba defense, and Tark would sit there for 20 minutes on a napkin explaining the amoeba defense to some guy that he had just met.
I was a teenager, and we got into a van and drove to LA for the PCAA tournament. And we see Tark and Lois, so we start screaming out, "Hey, Tark," you know, whatever, we're screaming out the window. And he goes, "Hey, guys," and he waves us over, and the van pulls over, and he goes, "We take Lois back to the Hilton?" That's the kind of love affair that there was between Tarkanian and the city of Las Vegas. Even in LA, he had complete confidence that he could put his wife in a van with strangers, and she would make it to the hotel safely.
A pretty good ball game.
Only 4 years after his arrival in Vegas, Jerry Tarkanian had moved UNLV into the big time. But it came with a price. Just 5 months after the 1977 season ended, with a close loss to North Carolina in the Final Four, the NCAA officially hit UNLV with numerous major rules infractions. There were charges of grade fixing, recruiting violations, and providing players with extra benefits, including free clothing, cash gifts, and other various merchandise, some of which occurred before Tarkanian arrived in 1973. Still, the penalty was severe. A 2-year ban on appearing on national TV and from participating in postseason play. Then, the bombshell. Citing infractions dating back to his days at Long Beach State, the NCAA took the extremely unusual step of recommending that UNLV suspend its coach, Jerry Tarkanian, for 2 seasons.
Was he a perfect coach? Was he a saint? Did he do things that a lot of other coaches did? I imagine he did. I like to say there are no virgins in big-time college athletics. If you're going to win big, you're going to play some of those games. You're going to commit some rules violations. Sometimes unknowingly, many times knowingly.
Were they extra benefits? Technically, yes. Were other schools doing it? Of course. Can you prove it? That's another story. And that's always been the case. This goes back to before he came to Vegas. Even back when he was at Long Beach, he was being investigated.
They came after us at Long Beach State. In the history of college sports, no school has ever been on probation that had less resources than we had. We didn't have any money. Our pregame meal was Kentucky Fried Chicken. We led the nation in Kentucky Fried Chicken. We were right down the road from UCLA, and UCLA had Sam Gilbert at that time. Sam Gilbert was a one-man boosters club, and the NC2A did nothing to them. And we were being investigated. It was brutal.
Not everybody cheats. And to say that we picked on smaller schools because allegedly they were easier targets, it doesn't work that way. And the word selective enforcement was tossed around quite a bit.
Tarkanian did more than just toss that theory around. At Long Beach State, he went public about it, writing a series of articles openly criticizing the NCAA for what he felt was a tendency to pick on smaller, less influential schools.
That, more than anything, was what became the first burr in the saddle of the NCAA. And then as he became successful, he didn't back off on his criticism of the organization. That made him even more of a target.
This was the Turks and the Armenians, and the NCAA was the Ottoman Empire. I mean, was Tark running a clean program?
No, I don't think you can say that. But when you got on the radar screen of the NCAA in those days, you were putting yourself in the crosshairs of people that did not like to be embarrassed. And he was the blip that they wanted to get rid of. And Tark was like, you know what, fuck you.
For crying out loud!
I couldn't let them make those allegations. We would have won in any court in the world. They had no evidence, believe me. They had no evidence.
I'd like to say it's just common sense that when you have an accumulation of data, comments back from schools that compete against the school in question, what I like to refer to as noise out there. Everything is thrown in.
Ultimately, when the NCAA did present its evidence against UNLV, Tarkanian switched tactics. He objected to how the evidence was obtained, arguing that the methods employed by an eager NCAA enforcement staff, led by its young investigator David Burst, were unjust, vindictive, and lacked due process.
I mean, there's no personal animus that I'm aware of against the guy.
David Burst called Jerry a rug merchant. Now, what is a rug merchant in relationship to Armenians? That's an ethnic slur. He believed that he had to get this guy by whatever means possible.
The NCAA had done things that were potentially illegal, but were certainly unethical. They knew how to take and twist words. They didn't tape record interviews. They encouraged student athletes to sign statements with the promise of immediate eligibility someplace else.
The NCAA was pretty thick around here, and they interviewed us, talked to us about different things. Did you get anything coming here? Were you promised anything? And I was like, shit, I barely got a chance to get here.
They used every trick you could use to try to get to an end goal.
And there was no due process at all. None whatsoever.
So Tarkanian fought back, getting a Nevada judge to grant a permanent injunction, preventing UNLV from imposing the NCAA suspension.
But I'm real grateful for our judicial system.
He could continue to coach, but his team would stay on probation. And the lack of national exposure hurt the program.
In between there was a 16-12 season, some very ordinary seasons of basketball.
We're allowing them to throw the ball where they want. Deny the next pass.
And then along comes the 82-83 season, and they were back, led by Sidney Green that year.
And my son played during that time. We weren't supposed to be very good. In fact, I don't think we were picked in the top 25 in any poll. And we wound up #1 in the country for 2 weeks.
And back in the NCAA tournament for the first time in 6 seasons. The resurgence came just as the Rebels were about to move into their new, glitzy, state-of-the-art home, the Thomas & Mack Center, a 20,000-seat on-campus arena partially financed through funds from slot machine revenues.
When we got the Thomas & Mack Arena, I mean, I'm still, to this day, there's nothing more exciting than those Rebel games were.
Oh, man. When they roll out the red carpet, you have the fireworks going off. That was quite an adrenaline rush. The best part was the Jaws theme music.
Of the shark roaming around the arena and the music.
Dun, 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 dun. And you had everybody doing the shark.
Kept trying to get more seats in the arena because it sold out so often, so they added a row right next to the edge of the court. And that row, they charged extremely high prices for the tickets.
Along with the ideal perspective of Runnin' Rev round ball has come a nickname. A local newspaper writer has dubbed these seats Gucci Row.
They had all the fancy clothes and the jewelry and the big rings and the over-made-up mistresses and stuff. All the well-heeled boosters, most of them from the casinos. It was quite a show.
It was a home court advantage like no other, and the Rebels took full advantage, becoming nearly unbeatable at the Thomas & Mack, or anywhere else for that matter. In 1987, led by Freddie Banks, Jarvis Bassnight, and Armin Gilliam, UNLV won a school record 37 games and returned to the Final Four as the #1 team in the country, where they faced Indiana.
We were expected to win the whole thing. We were the favorites. We were playing great. Once we got to the Final Four, I don't think we played our best basketball. We had to battle all night just to get the game close, and we couldn't overtake them at the end. The city wants a championship so bad, and I felt like I disappointed everybody.
By the late 80s, UNLV had established itself as one of the elite basketball programs in the country. But it wasn't just winning games that was making headlines.
He considers UNLV a halfway house for troubled youth, and a lot of people disagree with him, including myself.
My first year on the beat, I started looking into the academic history, and I wrote a big story about their lousy graduation record. I wrote that they had only 4 graduates in the first 10 years of the program. That's when I realized this place was different. Tarkanian told me once college degrees are overrated.
I think you have to touch all segments of society, not just the elite. It's more important for the university to educate than it is to graduate. Let's bring it in.
Jerry Tarkanian's philosophy of recruiting players with questionable social and academic skills to succeed at college was as much a part of his legacy as his success on the court. His approach was high risk, high reward, criticized by some as exploitation, praised by others as saving souls.
Tark was very sympathetic toward young basketball players who had had some setback in the classroom with authorities, that he could help that young man in any way. By allowing him to play basketball, he would do that.
What the hell are you doing? Hey, tell me you haven't been going to class now. If a kid has had a problem someplace else, it doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad kid.
They come from impoverished environments. Oftentimes they're going to come from single-parent homes. Should we just say, well, you know what, let's just pretend that none of those people even exist. None of them deserve an opportunity. I don't understand that thought process.
And the ulterior motive of all is he thinks these guys could play. He's not just being Father Flanagan giving a kid a second chance, okay? His whole thing's winning. He wasn't just doing stuff out of the goodness of his heart.
In college basketball recruiting, it's risk-reward. And as time went on, I think that risk-reward ratio for Tark got out of whack.
There's no question that Jerry took chances on kids that most coaches wouldn't touch with a 100-foot pole. They just wouldn't do it.
Players like Richie Adams, who had a reputation for stealing and using drugs on the streets of New York City, but who went on to become a star at UNLV in the early 80s. Or 6'10" Clifford Allen, who Tark recruited right out of reform school and was arrested even before he enrolled at Vegas. Then there was Lloyd Daniels, a seductive talent who Tark recruited in 1987, despite having reading skills that were reported to be at a 3rd grade level.
He was maybe the best young player I had ever seen. The only question is, will he get his academics up?
I was having a debate with Tarkanian and about 5 boosters about ready to tear my limbs off because I was saying that Daniels didn't belong in school. The boosters in most schools went there. I didn't meet a booster who went to UNLV. They couldn't find the library if you gave them a map. So the fans and the big-moneyed boosters there didn't care about the school's academic reputation.
It's the sort of thing that you look at it and it doesn't pass the smell test, as they say. It just didn't feel right.
You have to be a rebel.
Don't say that, we don't need that.
I know.
He is, Jesus Christ.
He's tall as hell.
Then, just 2 weeks before he was to attend UNLV.
Guess who we just got?
Don't tell me a basketball player.
Lloyd Daniels.
Lloyd Daniels.
The story just escalated huge.
Right there on the 11 o'clock news, Daniels embarrassed both himself and the university.
Lloyd Daniels was picked up in a routine cocaine bust.
Lloyd, you realize what you may have done to your career?
After Daniels got busted, I wrote a column saying that Tarkanian had bastardized college athletics and made a mockery of higher education. They had completely punted academic integrity. I get back the next morning, and my apartment has been completely trashed. I mean, everything was overturned completely. It looked like a hurricane went through there. And then the next day, I go to Tarkanian's office, and he said, I don't blame you for being upset, but I'm not surprised. People want to kill you, John.
We probably wouldn't have got involved if I knew the way it turned out. We had no idea that he was involved in drugs, and that as soon as we found out, we dropped him.
Daniels never played a minute at UNLV, and just 7 months later, the NCAA began yet another investigation of the basketball program, based in part on evidence provided by the university itself. But in spite of the intensifying scrutiny both inside the school and out, basketball at UNLV kept getting bigger. And by 1990, it was about to get better, thanks to Larry Johnson, a junior college transfer with unlimited potential.
Larry Johnson was one of the singular and greatest college basketball players that we've ever had, with just incredible explosion.
He seemed like a man among boys. He was so big and so strong, and yet he had such great touch.
It was the first time we ever got anybody of that stature. So we knew we were going to really be good. Larry Johnson is the ultimate team player. Every time a guy make a great play, Larry'd go hug him. After a while, the whole team's hugging each other.
That's what really allowed our team to go to another level, because we had other guys. Stacey Augmon was an All-American.
I was a scorer in high school. But when I came to UNLV, in order for me to stay on the court, because we already had scorers there, was to play defense.
The true guard is Anderson Hunt, who was dead up, at least from the right wing. If you left him open for a square-up jumper, he was going to make it. You got Greg Anthony at point guard, consummate leader.
The year prior, we had gotten the Junior College Player of the Year in David Butler, who was an unbelievable talent.
One of the underrated guys was Moses Scurry. Moses would come off the bench, and I think he was in his 40s when he played on the team. Really, he looked like Grady from Sanford and Son, you know? But he had so much passion, and he'd just go crazy. He was roaring every time he got his hands on the ball.
Over the top to Scurry.
UNLV began the 1990 season at the top of the polls. But the Rebels still spent much of the early part of the season looking down the barrel of the NCAA's regulatory gun. To UNLV, and especially Tark, most of the NCAA's accusations seemed trivial. Unpaid charges for hotel minibars, and even surfboard rentals.
We led the nation in suspensions that year. I mean, we had guys that were suspended for when they checked out of the hotel, they didn't pay for a long-distance call, things that you never heard of.
Any institution that is comes under the examination of the enforcement department feels heat. But if there were not major infractions, it's quite possible minor infractions would go unnoticed. I don't recall ever a case being developed for a wrong lunch, a wrongful lunch.
However trivial the accusations, they did result in the suspension at one time or another of 10 different players.
We actually didn't have a starting five for the first 4 weeks of the season. We wouldn't know who was missing the game until right before the game, literally.
Like the time I got suspended, I was actually on the plane ready to go to LSU, and they actually came on the plane before it took off and said, I can't participate.
All but 1 or 2 players avoided being suspended. Every game, we would wonder, all right, whose turn is it tonight to have to sit out?
They clearly did not want UNLV and Tarkanian and these guys representing NCAA college basketball.
They tried to destroy that team every way they could. I said, we can do one of 2 things. We can get pissed off and get tougher and Hell Memley and kick the crap out of everybody, or else we could fold. And we just kept getting tougher and tougher.
The Rebels fought through the NCAA suspensions to win 19 of their first 23 games. It was the 24th, against Fresno State, that almost ended their season of dreams.
I'm going in for a layup, and the guy takes my legs out, and I couldn't get my hands down in time to break the fall, so in essence, I broke it with my face.
His head hit the floor with a sickening thud. You could hear it. He looked like he'd been shot.
And I end up breaking my chin and my jaw in 2 places, shattering teeth.
The whole Thompson Mack, dead silent. Can't hear a word. The speculation is the season was lost. So, next day they're in practice. Who shows up? His jaw's wired shut. He's got a hockey helmet on.
As captain of the team, it was important that the guys saw that I was committed to trying to see this thing through.
Told the rest of the players that we got a fighter here leading this team. We can't let him down. Let's go.
With a look that would have made the Phantom of the Opera proud, Anthony did not miss a single game and orchestrated a Rebel run that saw UNLV win 15 of its last 16 games. But more than that, by overcoming a season of mental and physical adversity, the Rebels had developed an us-against-them mentality that was hard to overlook and easy to criticize.
You talk to people who were around this team in the Big West in particular, it sounds like rock stars showing up. Just beating people up and down.
Over the top to score. Looking for the alley-oop, and they've got it.
Saw a team of urban African-American males playing with a particular swagger. In your face, it was aggressive, it was hard-edged, it was extremely confrontational. Outlaws. Very much in the ethos of street ball. There were a lot of people watching UNLV who were very proud of the fact that this swagger was being seen on national television and this team was so victorious playing this particular style of play, and the impact was profound in the inner cities, in the streets. The caps and the t-shirt, all the merchandising, anything to do with UNLV was very cool, because to wear UNLV, you were basically saying, I too am a rebel, and I identify with their rebellious spirit. There were a lot of other people watching UNLV who cringed. UNLV was called thugs.
They thought we were all thugs and idiots and dumb kids who were athletes, not even student athletes, that didn't even deserve to be in school.
I hear some people saying, we heard you guys were thugs. I just giggle. I'm like laughing like, wow, us thugs.
The thug issue was racism, and there's just no other way to put that. The president of the Young Republicans was the point guard. They weren't going to jail. They weren't in the news left and right. All they were young black guys that just happened to have a whole lot of personality.
Too legit to quit. Till I got that. Too legit to quit. That's Hammer, baby. That's Hammer, man.
And undeniably, a whole lot of talent. UNLV finished the 1990 regular season with a record of 29-5 to earn the top seed in the West region of the NCAA tournament. After surviving a 2-point win over Ball State in the Sweet 16, the Rebels scored 131 points against Loyola Marymount to reach their third Final Four. Then, in the national semifinals, UNLV came from behind to beat Georgia Tech to reach its first NCAA championship game. And the contrast between the opponents could not have been more pronounced.
You got Duke, the Blue Bloods from the ACC. They were just starting to become the darlings of college basketball against these scruffy guys from Vegas.
It was a clash of styles. It was a clash of private, elite, Southern versus commuter, Las Vegas. I mean, every possible way you could divide it up was there. Some people saw black versus white.
Duke looked more like what college basketball was. UNLV, in the eyes of people, looked like what college basketball was becoming. Almost a professional basketball team with this renegade that is in charge. And they're playing against Duke. They are what college basketball should be. It's a high-ranking academic institution. You've got guys like Christian Laettner, guys like Bobby Hurley, guys that, for lack of a better term, look the part. Well, what way is the media going to create what that story is? And it wound up being the easy way. Duke was seen as the good team, and UNLV was the evil.
Some people see this game as a battle of the good boys against the bad.
Why this label bad boy? How it affects the rebels?
You label Duke the bad boys? Label us?
When it got to that point, it really did bother us. We felt like they were a good team, but we didn't feel like they were better people. You know, we're all basketball players. We're out there competing, representing our school, our communities, our families, and we'll find out tonight who the better team is.
And we begin.
With relentless pressure on defense and lightning strikes on offense, the Rebels rushed out to an early double-digit lead, led by 12 at the half. Soon after came the deluge, a 3-minute, 18-point run, which put the game out of reach.
We hit a spurt, and we just kept filling the basket up. I mean, we just seemed like we couldn't miss.
It back to the top, and there is Johnson. Here's Hunt coming in. It'll be Johnson with his second three. Hunt off the fake, up on the dribble, and comes up and uses the glass.
It seemed like the basket was so big for all of us, and it just didn't stop.
Henderson's back. Hunt bringing it in.
It just started to snowball. 16, 18, 20, 21, 23. It's growing. And there's nothing that Mike Krzyzewski or anybody at Duke can do about it.
Been a tough night for that man there.
They wore us down. Their athleticism, their pressure, they were relentless. And I thought they played their best game in the championship game, which says something about the character of their team.
With about 5 minutes to go and we're up 28, I felt pretty safe.
Tarkanian is sitting on the bench and he goes, I don't have to do anything now.
Hunt hits a three, and folks, this one's all Vegas. They have won their first ever national championship, and in 3 trips, the Shark comes away a winner in a record-setting night, 103-73. UNLV.
They put 103 on the board. They beat them by 30. Just hang your head, walk off the court, go straight to the bus, get on the plane and go home because you've just been dismissed.
They were so deserving of winning the national championship that year. My hat's off to them because we could have played them 20 times. We wouldn't have beaten them in any of the games.
What did they call us the other day? Thugs. You can call us thugs, you can call us all that. But at the end, put that on there too. You know, we appreciate it just for us to put national champs on there.
It was a really surreal feeling because never in your wildest dreams would you ever imagine winning a championship like that, especially in the NCAAs when for so many years those championship games were so close.
Joey, I want to ask you one thing. With all your problems that you've had at UNLV, you have stayed with it. Did you ever think about quitting and walking away as a coach?
No, I love UNLV. I love what I'm doing. Not that this win is for the kids, but it's mostly for the great people in the state of Nevada. The whole state supports us, and I'm just so happy for them.
Students celebrated the crowning of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas as the NCAA men's basketball champions. It was the most lopsided victory in the history of the NCAA tournament. The UNLV Runnin Rebels buried Duke 103-73.
People still really didn't believe that this little school from Las Vegas, Nevada had actually just won the national championship. Man, it was just so powerful and so emotional. It meant so much to so many people.
The town was absolutely went berserk. It was just a great time. I went about 2 days without sleep, and I need a lot of sleep.
It helped the community feel good about itself, and we're a community that normally hosts other people. It was our party, and our party alone.
That was very exciting because you didn't feel like you were a part of a community in Vegas. You always felt like you were in someone else's town, but the Rebels were something that we could all be proud of, and you could be proud to be from Las Vegas because of the Rebels.
It was unifying. All of us in Vegas were part of the same family. And those guys made it possible.
Just a few months after the championship season, both Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon announced they would return to UNLV for their senior year. Unfortunately, the NCAA had different plans. Citing gross violations dating back to 1977, the organization banned the Rebels from postseason play, leading the players to playfully question the fairness of the NCAA's decision.
It's very unfair what's going on because when the situation happened, well, I think they get me back for stealing them bikes when I was 11 and 12 years old and all the criminal things. I think that's what that is, Coach.
Eventually, a compromise was reached. The postseason ban was moved to 1992. UNLV would be allowed to defend its title. The 1991 season was historic. The Rebels were ranked #1 all year long and finished the regular season on a 41-game winning streak, dating back to the previous year. They didn't just beat opponents, they crushed them, with an average margin of victory an amazing 28 points per game.
Every game I tell our guys how tough it's going to be, and then we'd go out and destroy everybody. I remember I used to sit on a bench in practice, and I'd sit over to Tim Gergerich, my assistant, and say, Tim, can we be this good? I was amazed at how good we were.
That was the most effective machine that we had seen, like post-Wooden, in college basketball. I mean, that's a perfect team.
The perfection continued in the NCAA tournament. UNLV breezed through 4 more games to reach the national semifinals with a record of 34-0, setting up a rematch with Duke.
1, 2, 3,
When we played them in '91, we were a better team. We had Hurley now as a sophomore, Leitner, and Grant Hill, even though he was a freshman, was the most talented player on the court. At that point, we felt we were their equal. The fact that they beat us badly the year before was probably a positive for us and a little bit of a negative for them.
They were getting ready to play the semifinal game against Duke. The Rebels had to go to a high school in Indianapolis, and they had a shoot-around the morning of that night's game.
You can see this look on Tark's face. He's half pissed and he's half freaking out. I said, Jerry, what's the matter? I said, I don't think we're ready to play. I'm telling you, something's not right. I can feel it.
And Tark called them together at the end of the shoot-around, and I will never forget this. He looked at them and said, you guys are going to lose tonight because you're not focused enough on this game.
Whatever the reason, one thing was certain. Right from the start, it was clear that Duke was a different team. This time, the Blue Devils were not intimidated and surprisingly climbed to within 3 points of UNLV late in the second half.
UNLV being threatened like at no other time this season.
With a little under 4 minutes to play and UNLV clinging to a 74-71 lead, a close call changed the game.
I got the ball, I make a drive to the left, I get a layup, I think I get an and one.
Yes, they called the charge. No basket, no basket. basket.
The official calls a charge. I foul out of the game.
He's out of here. 5 for Anthony.
We were fortunate that he was called for the charge, but also we knew he had 4 fouls and we were trying to take the charge because if he goes out of the game's going to change.
Duke took advantage of Anthony's absence and took control of the game to take a 2-point lead in the final moments.
Duke is 12 seconds away from one of the biggest upsets in Final Four history.
With the season on the line, the Rebels got the ball into the hands of the National Player of the Year, Larry Johnson.
Larry Johnson brings the ball up.
But without their senior point guard running the show, UNLV appeared disorganized.
Will have to do
Shockingly, the dream of winning back-to-back titles was over.
Duke has done it. Duke has upset UNLV.
Larry Johnson felt so bad after that he had on his answering machine, "Okay, I know, I should have taken the last shot." That was his answering machine for months after that.
He lost a heartbreaker. It was the toughest loss I've ever had. I mean, I just love those kids so much. They were the best. And even to this day, people refer to it as one of the great teams of all time.
The meltdown in the 1991 semifinal had been shocking, but it was nothing compared to what appeared in the Las Vegas Review-Journal 2 months later, on the morning of May 26, 1991.
I remember seeing that photo and just saying to myself, oh my God, no. No. You have 3 basketball players in a hot tub with a guy whose nickname is the Fixer. This is all we need.
That was a terrible picture. There was nothing good about that picture. Even just how happy they are in the shot. It's not, you just don't want to see your team in a hot tub with a guy who fixes basketball games.
I'm not saying that they thought he was a saint, but no one really knew who he was. Unfortunately, though, you got to deal with the fallout of it in terms of answering questions, people speculating, but, you know, not our finest hour.
Richard, the Fixer Perry, was actually well known around UNLV. According to a Time magazine article written in 1989, he frequently socialized with players and even helped recruit them. Players like Lloyd Daniels, who he later bailed out of jail after his drug bust. Even worse, Perry had a checkered gambling past, having been implicated in the Boston College game-fixing scandal in the late 1970s.
David and Anderson said that they had stayed away, and all our kids had said the same thing. But, you know, this picture was taken at least 2 years ago, maybe even longer.
I don't even know how you can even begin to justify somebody of the caliber of Richie Perry being around your program. I mean, supposedly all these college basketball coaches know exactly what their players are doing and who they're hanging out with until there's trouble, and then it's plausible deniability. That is the cardinal sin of college basketball, is any kind of questions with gambling around your program, even in Vegas. There's just no way. No matter how big you are, no matter what your nickname is, no matter how you present yourself, you don't survive gamblers in hot tubs with your players. Doesn't happen.
Unfortunately for Tarkanian, that was also the opinion of Robert Maxson, a respected educator who would become UNLV's president in 1983.
UNLV can become one of the great urban universities in this country.
Maxson insisted that he was just as focused on academics as Tarkanian was on basketball. His goal was to turn UNLV into the Harvard of the West. Though he often supported Tark publicly and openly reveled in the basketball team's success, the hot tub photo was just too much of a public relations nightmare. So on June 7th, 1991, just 12 days after the photo surfaced, the university president told the most popular person in the state of Nevada he was through.
After 18 years.
Although Tark was allowed to coach one final season.
When Jerry Tarkanian was forced out in 1991, it divided the community right down the middle.
What is this university known for around the nation? What are they known by? I've gone all over the country. What do they say? What do they say about UNLV? They say the Runnin' Rebels.
And you're probably the slickest cat on the block.
Well, Maxson had a lot of support within the university.
Boisterous crowds, several hundred strong, staged a rally on the UNLV campus, who proclaimed it was now time to place academics ahead of athletics.
He also had a lot of support from some important quarters around here. Steve Wynn became a big supporter of Maxson.
They think that I'm running a university, that they didn't have any control over me, which was bullshit because I never tried to run anything.
The ordinary people of Las Vegas, they resented the campaign against Jerry.
They can't say we didn't fill an arena.
There was a Baptist church in West Las Vegas.
They can't say that we didn't have good kids.
And they held a rally for him.
Usually when you do all those things, you get a raise. You don't get fired.
The place was packed. There's chanting, keep Tark, keep Tark, keep Tark.
They chanted, demanded Tarkanian fight to keep his job as coach of the Runnin' Rebs.
Finally, Tark gets up. I rescind my resignation.
I am rescinding my resignation.
The place is going nuts. People are crying. It's a pandemonium scene. I called Maxson at home. He said, I expect Coach Tarkanian to abide by our deal.
How have we gotten to this point that a coach that won a national championship 2 years ago is now being run off by some guy from Texas, Bob Maxson, that was now telling us we got to get rid of him and get a new coach? You had rabid fans at that point that were visibly upset.
The drama grew even darker in the days before Tark's final season, when a tape surfaced of a UNLV preseason team practice, a potential violation of NCAA rules.
I was opposed to it. I abhorred that type of surveillance.
Within days, the Maxson administration was forced to admit they had secretly taped the practice and leaked it to the media.
The secret taping happened last month. A video camera was concealed inside an air vent in the North Gym. Dennis Finfrock resigned after word of the taping got out. Brad Book authorized the secret videotaping of the Rebels. Coach Tim Gugarich was conducting the classes at the time. Book felt there may have been some violations of NC2A rules. If so, he wanted them on tape.
Power has run amok at the university.
Is UNLV really a rising star in education or a police state?
Many of Tark's supporters were not surprised. Convinced that over the years, Maxson's administration had been behind the continued leaking of information intended to damage its own basketball program. So when UNLV finished the 1992 season with 23 straight wins, running Tark's record in his final 2 years to 60-3, the Thomas and Mack Center was filled with adoring fans saying a reluctant goodbye. After turning UNLV into the only game in town, in a town that loves its games, Jerry Tarkanian went out just like he came in. A controversial coach with 509 wins, 4 Final Fours, and 1 national championship. The headliner of the greatest show on the Strip, the Runnin' Rebels of UNLV.
Las Vegas was, and still is, a frontier city where the rules are still being written or haven't been written. We are a run and done kind of town, a town where things were legal that weren't legal elsewhere. So when you look at the basketball program, this is part of our image. It was a perfect match and a perfect storm.
The legacy of the Runnin Rebels and Jerry Tarkanian's era was dynamic. It helped UNLV to grow in terms of enrollment, in terms of national attention. Positive and negative, but the fact is that the Runnin Rebels of Jerry Tarkanian's era forever changed UNLV.
Very few guys build programs, and he built it in a place where there was no history or tradition or culture for the game. The coach has been not only an inspiration, in a lot of ways he was a father figure to all of us.
For 2 years, UNLV was the dominant team in college basketball, one of the elite programs of all time.
Anyone that lived in Vegas during that time loves that team. It was a great time to be in Las Vegas. It was a great time of our lives.
We had the greatest group of guys that any program in the country had, and they don't come any better. I wouldn't trade this experience for anything.
We were demonized, but ultimately, no matter what they say or think, they can never take away what we've accomplished. And that city took tremendous pride in that program, and still does to this day.
There's everywhere else, and then there's Vegas. Anywhere else just don't fit the bill. You travel the world, and then there's Vegas. You feel like a king, king of the whole damn hill. There's everywhere else, and then there's Vegas, baby. Ain't no place I'd rather be. There's no place else that shines so bright, so make it Las Vegas tonight.
This has been a presentation of HBO Sports.